Hey, what's happening today, Push Kids? We're back for our next lecture in AP US History. Today, we're going to be covering topic 4.5, the Market Revolution, Industrialization. So here we go. Learning objective 4E. Explain the causes and effects of the innovations in technology, agriculture, and commerce over time. So today we're going to be learning about how all of these different new innovations and technologies are going to have an impact. So we'll have a bunch of key terms and ideas for you guys today. So our first key ideas come to us. First, entrepreneurs are going to help to create a market revolution in production and commerce, in which market relationships between producers and consumers came to prevail as the manufacture of goods became more organized. And key idea number two, innovations including textile machinery, steam engines, interchangeable parts, the telegraph, and agricultural inventions increase the efficiency of production methods. So here we go. In the early antebellum era from 1800 to 1840, our U.S. economy is growing very, very rapidly. North, South, and West are each going to start to develop their own specialized regional economies that become connected in that national market. We kind of talked about that connections yesterday. So we had the American system, which connected through roads and canals such as the Erie Canal, the different regions of the country, those that allowed, for instance, people that lived in the Midwest to sell their agricultural products to the East Coast. It allowed Southern manufacturers to produce cotton and other products to sell it to Northern textile industries and Northern industries to be able to sell their finished products to the Midwest. Now, this is really going to be aided by several specific inventions that you'll need to know about. And the first and probably the most famous is going to be Eli Whitney's cotton gin. Now, he invents the cotton gin in 1793. And this really makes cotton easy to refine and really, really profitable. The problem with cotton beforehand was that cotton was very labor intensive. The seeds within the actual cotton fiber fabric was very difficult to remove, and his gin, which is just short for an engine or a machine, used a series of brushes to be able to remove, with very little labor, the seeds from the cotton, being able to make it, an incredibly profitable product. Now, Eli Whitney's cotton gin is not going to come into really wide use until the next century, until the 1800s. It becomes in very, very wide use by about 1815 or so. By 1820, there's a lot of cotton gins that are being utilized. Unfortunately, Eli Whitney didn't make a whole lot of money from his cotton gin. People just continued to copy the product. He spent a lot of his life suing people to try and earn some money for copyright infringement. Anyways, the result of this, the result of Eli Whitney's cotton gin, though, is absolutely massive. First of all, cotton is going to become the dominant cash crop of the Deep South. It's known as king cotton. We see cotton, British cotton consumption, for instance, in the upper right-hand corner. You see how much it grows. The number of textile or places where cotton is being manufactured. You can see throughout the South how it's growing exponentially. The tobacco is still being produced in places in and around, for instance, the Virginia region. The tobacco is the area that's in yellow in that map, but the pink is all those cotton producing regions now of the country, and cotton really becomes king. And so, for instance, the South now is going to become incredibly important in terms of the export market. 75% of the world's cotton is coming out of the South. And by 1860, it dominates our nation's exports. Nearly 58% of all U.S. exports are in cotton. Now, this also, though, has impacts beyond the South. Because of the amount of cotton that's being produced in the South, it helps the North, where that cotton then is spun and made into textiles. It's made into cloth. It's made into clothing. And many places, many towns in the North start to develop textile factories that take the cotton and spin it, and this becomes an important part of the Northern economy. But Eli Whitney wasn't done with just the cotton gin. Eli Whitney was a major inventor at the time. And he's also going to develop something that we call interchangeable parts. And the idea of interchangeable parts and new textile technologies such as the power loom, the spinning mule, and the sewing machine, which I'm going to show you on the next slide right there, are going to really revolutionize industries in the North. Now, interchangeable parts is the idea that you would build something using a lot of different parts that were you could just make that one part and you could use it on any of the products. Now, the picture that you see there is of a gun, and that's because that's what Eli Whitney used, was to really demonstrate the power of interchangeable parts. It used to be that most manufactured products were made by skilled craftsmen who would make an item one at a time by hand, and they were made of custom-made parts. So if something broke, your entire item was broken. Most guns were made that way. Eli Whitney, in an attempt to get a U.S. government contract for firearms, or 10,000 gun contract, what he did is he took six guns, and he took them apart, put all the pieces in a box, shook the box, and then reassembled the gun and was able to fire it. This demonstrated the idea and the power of interchangeable parts, because each of those parts could be mass produced and could be made much more cheaply than by one single craftsman. This drastically would lower the cost of the manufacture and production of not only guns, but really everything else, because everything that we make today is made via interchangeable parts. Now, here's some of those other textile machines that we talked about earlier. The sewing machine, power loom, spinning mule are all used in the creation of these massive textile firms that you have there. Now, not only were new technologies important, but also ways to organize those technologies within a textile mill. In the 1790s, the guy you see in the upper right-hand corner, his name was Samuel Slater, and he's going to use British industrial designs and build the first American textile factories. And the way that he set those up, usually along the banks of a river, to harness the power of moving water to be able to power everything within within that plant, becomes the model for really all of New England. And what we see is that textile mills are going to spread throughout New England and become that region's single largest economic source. By 1840, northern factories mass-produced textiles, farm equipment, and many, many other finished goods. Now, what this is going to start to lead to is, especially in the Northeast, is we see the growth in factories is directly related to the increase of the American city, concept we often call urbanization. And American cities, as you can see from this map, and we'll just kind of change it back and forth. You can see in 1820, we see this region right over here, the size of those cities. Only New York has a population over 100,000. However, by 1860, we see that Chicago, St. Louis, Cincinnati, New Orleans have now grown in size, and now we're starting to get cities that are starting to approach 500,000 to 1 million in terms of overall population. American urban growth is accelerated by the growth of manufacturing. In addition to this, new technologies are also going to make large-scale farming possible. Some of those new technologies, including Cyrus McCormick's mechanical reaper, which you see on the upper right-hand side. You see John Deere steel plow was important for being able to plow up the tough prairie soil on the Great Plains in the Midwest, places like Illinois, Ohio, and now moving into Missouri. And this allows for large-scale industrial farming. And what this then kind of really leads into then is America, the West especially, becomes America's breadbasket. We start to see commercial farms producing wheat, corn, and livestock. And this idea of a commercial farm is a little bit different than what we talked about earlier with farming. Before, we had talked about this yeoman farmer, this idea of this small family, the small family farm. And it's not just a small family farm anymore. It's now a large farm that's very industrial in nature. It'll often during harvest or planting time have to bring in a large workforce to be able to harvest the entire crops. It requires large-scale machinery to be able to operate. And so we see, thanks to different types of technologies and processes, we see the South, the North, and the West have all been transformed because of technology, leading us into key idea number 3 and 4. So, key idea 3, legislation and judicial systems are going to support the development of roads, canals, railroads, which extend into large markets and help foster regional interdependence. Transportation networks are going to link these areas more between the North and Midwest more closely than the South. And key idea 4, increasing industrial con production and the related growth of northern manufacturing, banking, and shipping industries promote the development of national and international ties. So between 1800 and 1840, these 3 regional economies became connected into a national market, once again helped out by Henry Clay's American system. Now, in the South, they're producing cotton. In the North, they are having industrial manufacturing. In the West, we see this is American breadbasket. Once again, as I mentioned before, it's Henry Clay's American system is that connection between all 3. Now, the American system is going to create a tariff. It promotes northern industry as well. And that second bank provides federal money for investment and regulation over the U.S. banking system. I mean, the Bank of the United States had held $10 million in federal money loaded into state banks, which forced smart banks to be smart when issuing loans. So that money went from the national banks to state banks, and then those state banks could loan money to individuals, citizens, businesses, and local governments to finance various different things. So Clay's American system provided the funding for transportation, and this transportation revolution created infrastructure of roads, canals, and a very early railroad system. Now, farmers in the South and West could get their goods to market usually by using the river systems or by ocean-based shipping. But the problem was that no rivers connected eastern and western factories and farmers. The Appalachian Mountains were, kind of in the way. Now, private companies and some state governments and the national government are going to start to invest in road construction, such as the Cumberland Road and the National Road all start to link the different regions together. And many states are going to start to build canals that will also link east and west. Now, the most important of these canals is built in upstate New York and northern New York, and it connects Buffalo to Albany and the Hudson River, so essentially connecting the Great Lakes to New York City. Now, it was completed in 1825, and the Erie Canal is going to bring so much trade down the Hudson River, New York City becomes the commercial capital of the United States and doubles in size as a direct relation to the creation of that Erie Canal. Now, technologies also, besides just canal building, made these connections important as well. Transportation improvements in technology was also important. Robert Fulton helped to invent the steamboat. His first steamboat is called the Claremont, and this allowed for faster upriver travel and helped to reduce shipping time and costs. And these canals and steamboats essentially allowed Western farmers to buy manufactured farm equipment, reduce shipping costs by nearly 90% when they sold their goods back to places like New York City, and helped to increase their profits. So for instance, we can look at the chart here on the left-hand side, and we can see that freight rates are starting to go significantly down. It was much cheaper to use a canal, to use river systems, and even when railroads start to be introduced in 1835, they're much cheaper than the wagon rates had been before. Now, in the 1830, the first railroads are going to be constructed. Now, the growth of trains were slow because they were expensive and competed with canals, but they were faster than roads and canals, and they could go at any season, even in the winter and in any direction. By the 1860s, railroads were going to be the dominant means of transportation in the United States. So, in summary, what we have is a national market system that's been developed, and it's been developed because of the addition of new technologies that have specifically influenced each region, and by the development of transportation systems that have connected each region. Well, make sure to smash the like and subscribe button, and until next time, go Pack.